the session, I have the Minister of Health and Social Security, Honorable Nicholas Steele, along with the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sean Charles. We will, of course, be discussing health issues, specifically COVID matters. I will start with the Minister of Health, Honorable Nicholas Steele.
Good morning, Philomena, and good morning to all of our viewers and listeners out there, members of the media. Again, apologies for the late start from the technical difficulties. I want to start this morning to reiterate what the global position and what our national situation is right now. As we are seeing worldwide, all governments in every country is struggling with are on lockdown or some form of lockdown, or are experiencing some of the highest levels ever of the spread of this pandemic. In Grenada, we have taken aggressive steps since March of this year to deal with this pandemic. Those steps, in general, have been extremely successful. There have been shortcomings and shortfalls with those steps. And we do expect, with the challenges that we are dealing with this new threat, that there will be other areas that need to be strengthened also, like the rest of the world, learning from this. We continue to try to find a balance between life, or saving and protecting lives, and livelihoods of our country. We have to acknowledge that we are also dealing with the psyche of our nation. Many, if not all of us, are beginning to experience what I can term battle fatigue in this war against COVID-19. And as a result, many of us in certain instances are dropping, and as such, we are experiencing certain shortfalls from persons. I have to acknowledge that the frontline team has been providing yeoman service, working 24/7, literally 24/7, to maintain our border control, to maintain our monitoring, to maintain and keep persons in quarantine who we are seeing groups of consistently trying to breach for whatever reasons, be it themselves, their individual psyche, or be it that they're coming from regions that are not taking the virus as seriously as we do. Those are the realities that we are dealing with. We look at every shortfall as an area to, one, acknowledge, adjust, and correct immediately, wherever possible. But we do recognize that there will be shortfalls and there will be breaches. This is why we have consistently said that there are 3 levels of defense. There is our border control, and we'll consistently make every effort to strengthen it further. The second level is our contact tracing and wardens, the contact tracing team, to isolate, to identify and isolate individuals. And the third and most important level is us as a community practicing the various protocols. The details of this weekend's breach will show the value of all 3 of those levels of defense, the need for all 3 of those levels of defense to be taken seriously. And you will see in individual instances as facts that we will have individuals that will breach level 1 of our defense, and as such we need to rely on level 2 and most importantly level 3. So having said that, I want to now give some details of this weekend's incident, which starts with 2 individuals came in to Grenada. Prior to them entering Grenada, they applied, like others, for home quarantine. Like others, a determination was made, team, that a medical doctor, a retired, experienced medical doctor, could be trusted to home quarantine, cannot be criticized at that point in time. On hindsight, we would have, I cannot fault the team at that point for making that decision. The individual, like others, who are accepted for home quarantine was tested at the airport on arrival. He had a negative PCR test before arriving into Grenada and was tested on arrival in Grenada, and then scheduled to be tested on the 4th day of his quarantine. The first test on arrival, the results were negative. This is why we also insist on that 4th day test. The 4th day would have been Thursday. On Thursday he was swabbed, and therefore results were expected Friday or Saturday. On Friday evening, up to 8:15, the health travel desk was in communication with the individual, informing him that we did not have test results for his second test as yet. Based on the information we have, somewhere after 8:15, approximately 9:30, the individual left his home on his own with his partner and visited one establishment in the south. On Saturday morning, the individual then left his home again, had not received any results or any further communication from the health desk, and went to another establishment for breakfast. And these results, and made efforts to communicate to him. The individual was at his residence, and we were able to verify this from our contact tracing and wardens Saturday evening when we were trying to communicate to him. However, we were unable to reach him. At that point, we had information that led us to believe that he did breach the home quarantine, and therefore his residence was placed under 24-hour surveillance. Throughout Saturday night, he did not leave the property afterwards. Sunday morning, very early Sunday morning, we were able to communicate to him and give him his results. He then communicated to Dr. Charles. He will give further details in terms of naming the establishments that he went to and the individuals that he interacted with. Those establishments have been communicated to by the contact tracing team led by Dr. Sean Charles, and individuals who are deemed to be at possible risk of exposure have been home quarantined. The testing will begin on the 4th day from Saturday. Those individuals who have been asked to home quarantine will be tested then. At that point, we will know how many, if any, were fully exposed to the virus and possibly may have caught the virus from this incident. The lessons here are: one, the individual, although it is mandated by the Ministry of Health and legislation, a GPS device was not placed on the individuals at the airport. All other protocols were followed at the airport, but the GPS device was not placed on the individual at the airport. It was not from any waiver or instructions from the Ministry of Health, nor did the Ministry of Health know that this individual did not receive a GPS device. The monitoring, implementation, installing, and monitoring of the GPS device is done by a third-party service provider, and as such, the provider strengthens his resources and his ability to carry out the mandate given to this entity, or to find an alternative means that meets the criteria that the Ministry of Health insists upon. The other lesson here is that at some of the establishments where the protocols were followed, the risk of exposure to individuals has been minimum, but that one establishment was not following the protocols at that point in time, and therefore the risk of exposure is considered to be quite high. We do hope that none of the individuals in question have been exposed, but we have to take the necessary precautions and have adjusted accordingly to ensure as best as possible that this does not happen again. I end the way I started, to say that this challenge here in Grenada, we are not unique to this. Most, if not all, countries are dealing with similar instances of attempts to breach quarantine or breaches of quarantine. And most, if not all, countries have to find the ways and means to adjust and strengthen as we move forward. What we find are those countries that are failing are those countries that do not adjust, that do not admit that there are weaknesses in their system and find ways to strengthen it. In Grenada, the Ministry of Health has been totally transparent with the public, although many members of the public doubt that. We have announced every single case. We have announced the situation and occurrence or the circumstances on every single case. We have announced every single breach. We have told the public what is involved in that, because it is in our best interest to do so, to share that information so that individuals out there will know, one, the risks that continue to threaten us, and two, how to adjust accordingly. So having said that, I pass on to Dr. Charles and then to questions or so from the media. Thank you.
All right, so good morning to you and to your viewing and listening audience. In continuation of what was just outlined by Minister, we would like to point out that all establishments are required to maintain a log of everyone who works at and patronizes that business. As was mentioned, 3 out of the 4 establishments, 3 out of the 4 restaurants that were visited were able to furnish the Ministry of Health with this log, which greatly assists in the contact tracing operations. So all of the individuals who were at that site at the time were quickly contacted, and they are presently in quarantine and awaiting their first round of testing, which is on Friday. One of the institutions failed us in that aspect. No log could have been provided, and no evidence that logs are being collected by this institution was furnished. So it further drives home the point and the importance guidelines that are issued by the Ministry of Health, because at the end of the day, they are designed to protect the population. In addition, the staff and the public in general by the Ministry of Health, because it is in their interest so that when situations like this occurs, it will reduce the anxiety, because persons will not have to lose sleep wondering whether they were infected or not, because they were already following what was prescribed and what was outlined. So we just want to drive home the message to the public that it is absolutely important, it is absolutely necessary, if we are to avoid having an unpleasant situation as is occurring in many, and you assist us all in protecting this country. You follow the protocols, you follow the guidelines.
Yeah, if I can, Philo. In this instance, and in all of the instances we have seen, not just here in Grenada, but throughout the protocols, and in particular, the management or the owners, management and owners in this instance of a restaurant or bar, management or owners in the St. Lucia instance of public transport, management and owners of shops or bars in the countryside or so, if they are not following the protocols in most, if not all of the occurrences, they are the first ones to be infected by the individual. The management and staff are the first ones. The very persons who are against the interests of the public at large are in most instances the first ones to be infected. If the bus driver is not wearing his mask, he quite likely will be the first person to be infected, or the conductor. If the manager, waiter, waitress is not wearing their mask, they quite likely are going to be the first ones to be infected. So these are some of the serious lessons that have to be taken into consideration. So having said that, I'm open to hand back over to you, Phil.
Thank you very much, Minister. Before we go to questions from the media representatives present this past weekend.
So far we have 38 persons on that list.
And what is the contact tracing procedure that we're attempting to follow as it relates to the non-compliant business? The one that was not able to provide the log.
Okay, so when the business is not able to provide a log, then we have to rely on memory of everyone who attended or patronized that business. All right, the log is objective. When you have to rely on memory, it creates an issue. All right, so that is where the problems can arise. All right, so we have to rely on the memory of who are the persons that attended your or patronized your business, and we have to go through detailed questioning so that we finally are able to arrive at all the persons. And when we speak to one contact, then that contact is able to identify maybe one or two other persons that were there, and that is how you end up. But it is a bit more time-consuming. Phone number where we can directly reach those persons immediately, and we can implement public health action in a more timely manner.
And let me add to that too. What we have noticed, not in this instance, but we have seen other occurrences of it, of individuals not giving their real name to establishments that do enforce or mandate that every patron must give their name. What that does, I'm not sure if there's a breach or possible exposure, the ministry would not be able to get in touch with you. You would not know that you are possibly exposed. So whatever the intention might be to not give your name, it means that you quite likely wouldn't know, because we wouldn't know who you are. And I do not think that we live in a country where we should be insisting that every individual provide picture ID to prove who they are. I think we need to recognize your best interests to give your name so that you can be communicated to if perchance you were following all of the other protocols but somebody else there was not, and we need to inform you. So I'm asking the public who do frequent establishments to insist that, one, there is a log and that you put your name on the log, and two, where the establishment insists to individuals that they put their name on the log, that you give the correct name.
And against the non-compliant business as in keeping with our public health regulations?
In keeping with the public health regulations, there is a possibility of fines, and most definitely, as Minister, I have no intention of seeing any establishment reopen that has we have stepped up on the monitoring of establishments as we approach the Christmas season, and those that are non-compliant, from accommodation establishments to entertainment establishments, will be closed until they have gone through again the necessary training and convinced the Ministry of Health and contact tracing team and Dr. Charles's team that they are compliant and therefore worthy to reopen again. But establishments will remain closed that were non-compliant in this instance. And as we go through over the next 24 to 48 hours of inspections, other establishments will be closed.
Thank you very much, Minister. I do acknowledge that GB...
Good morning to the panel. I'm Marina Pierce. My question this morning is as it relates to the tracking watches. don't know who would be able to answer me, but there are reports that there are faulty not receiving the tracking watches. What comments would any one of you would like to make as it relates to the faulty watches, and who would be monitoring the persons, or how is the monitoring system working as it relates to monitoring the people who have the watches that are working? Is there someone stationed there 24/7 to monitor, or is it something that is done periodically? Also, I would like to ask questions about the health wardens. How many health wardens we have throughout the different parishes? So are they by groups? What is the schedule like? Do they go this week to this hotel and revisit in the next 2 weeks? What are the schedule like as it relates to the health wardens? And are they also doing home quarantine persons?
With respect to the GPS devices, we have, not just here in Grenada, but in other implemented, were lacking. One in the integrity of the device itself, and two in the ability to have that 24-hour monitoring. We have collectively worked a solution that is Grenada, St. Lucia, Jamaica, and British Virgin Islands, I believe. We have new devices coming in this week. The new devices, from the time you apply to come to Grenada, the devices plug in and work with that. These new devices address some of the shortfalls that we have seen, not just here in Grenada, but in other Caribbean islands as well, in that all stakeholders direct and immediate access to the back end of the device monitoring, that the police also have that same immediate access, that the provider, if there's a provider going forward, has that access as well, that Dr. Sean himself can look if there's a rumor or information of a breach. He can check and not have to rely on calling someone else at a desk or so on the individual or specific location or so. Those were some of the shortfalls that we found, not just here in Grenada, but in other countries, and we have found a device that will be here this week, and an improvement in the monitoring system. With respect, the wardens, Dr. Sean.
So with regards to the wardens, so between contact tracing, so this group comprises about 117 persons, and they are divided in different districts. So there are persons distributed across the country, both Grenada and Carriacou, PT Martinique. The wardens, basically, they assist with monitoring compliance. So there are businesses who are inspected and approved to operate and to ensure that they have the conditions to follow the protocols that are outlined by the Ministry of Health. So these wardens go back, assist with the inspection of homes for those persons who apply for home quarantine. Also, contact tracing is one of their functions. And of course, they assist in verifying breaches. For example, home quarantine, we will get a report that someone is seen on the outside of their homes it could be day or night, and we would reach out to the team in that particular district and ask them to go out and verify whether that is the case or not.
Let me add here that the wardens are delegates of the Chief Medical Officer. So the Public Health Act does give, specific to the sites, whether it's home quarantine or other accommodation sites, the wardens are involved from the beginning in terms of the approved, unless the wardens have visited that site to verify for themselves. Two reasons. One, to verify that the site is suitable, but two, to our public health officials, and therefore carry with them, under the instructions of the Chief Medical Officer, his authority to inspect and to verify.
The schedule. How do the wardens work their schedule? Do they visit this hotel today, and next 2 weeks or 3 days? Is there a schedule? Is there any relation with the president, with the doctor and his spouse as it really and SGU? Are you aware?
With respect to the schedule of the wardens, in the last couple of days there's been an increased schedule of visits. I have requested that all accommodations, every single approved accommodation, not home quarantine, every single approved accommodation be visited between this morning and the end of business tomorrow for further verification of certain criterias. But the wardens visit each site because we've separated the 100 plus 117 plus have been designated based on the density of sites, accommodation sites in each parish or each district, to ensure that there are enough to, if necessary, and in most cases it does happen at least every other day sites. The reason that it is every other day in some instances is because of the volume of home quarantine as well, for them to be visiting home quarantine sites as well. In terms of any affiliation of this individual to St. George's University, just all.
Minister, just to go further on the question with respect to SGU, there was actually a press release issued by SGU this morning shortly after 8, and the university wishes to confirm, this is quoting from the press release, that none of the recently reported cases of COVID-19 are SGU employees, faculty or students of the True Blue campus, and the university has in fact reiterated that its priority is to align with government's public health measures. And so again, Rena Pear, the St. George's University has confirmed that none of the cases, the recent cases, is in any way affiliated.
Good morning. Just wondering, in all the, this is the first time that I think that you have actually said what the person does for a living. You identified him as a medical doctor, and I'm just wondering why you did that. And is this person an American?
The ministry in each instance makes a determination as to what information is in the public's best interest or to assist us in the contact tracing, etc. In this instance, I would say it's also because this individual was home quarantined. The ministry felt it necessary upfront. In giving this individual the privilege of home quarantine, why we would have given this individual and not others home quarantine privilege. And it is a responsibility. And that was the main thing. It was in the determination of the team that looked at it that this individual was a medical doctor and therefore would have been responsible enough to stay home. In terms of the citizenship of the individual also, I think that's a question for further on down. As far as I'm aware, the individual is not a citizen of Grenada. And as such, that does give the law enforcement certain options to pursue and controlling the spread and dealing with this breach. Law enforcement and the courts will deal with the course of action that they choose to take.
Thank you. I might have missed at the beginning. Have you made any adjustments because of this instance to how you handle home quarantine?
Yes, we have. In fact, we made adjustments before this incident. The ministry made a determination that home quarantine will be granted under certain new either over 65, traveling with young kids or minors in their party, diplomats or government officials, have a disability or health condition, would be the circumstances for granting or the allowing the passing pre-screening of quarantine. And any other extenuating circumstances. Now, we left extenuating circumstances there because it just in the instance that there was something else that we did not consider. But in general, it is you must be over 65 or persons traveling in the party, children or minors in the party traveling in, medical or disability, diplomat or government official.
Nancy, would that be all from you this morning? Or do you have a third question?
Yes, I have one more question. In terms of the quarantine facilities where people have to go when they arrive, how many people can you accommodate?
I don't have the total number at the top of my head, but I can get that information for you. In fact, we had a briefing meeting at 7:30 this morning, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Tourism, and then we are meeting with the stakeholders, which would be those who provide the accommodations later on today, to have some discussions related to this and other issues, in general to strengthen and tighten. The Ministry of Health's efforts or endeavors to tighten the mechanisms quite likely may result in some of those sites that are currently approved coming off of the list for the time being. We have to find the balance, livelihoods at the expense of life. We have to come back closer to the center, and as such, I do believe that some sites will no longer be able to offer quarantine.
Thank you very much, Minister. Linda Straker, you're up next. You may proceed with your questions.
Good morning to you and to the Minister and Dr. Charles.
Good morning.
I have a number of questions. I hope I can get through all of them.
Three
To
first.
start with, the Minister spoke about the group out of Jamaica, the AMBER group, and the technology with regard to COVID. Would he be able to tell us if government is now will be terminating its arrangement with the city group that they have locally? Second question, evidence of falsifying names in logs. Is there any evidence of it in the logs that is currently being used to contact trace persons who would have been to the facilities? The facility that did not have log, I know when we were resuming to normal, there was an approach where health inspectors will okay a facility. Was that restaurant approved for reopening? And when they are approved for reopening, is the compliance certificate is given to them for public display? I have other questions, but I'll stop here.
With respect to the question on the AMBER group and city group, I've said the city group is being evaluated. There are one or two decisions or options coming out of this. Either we work together and they show us that they are able to strengthen and fill in the gaps that have become blaringly obvious, or that we find another alternative. We're not going to mix or play around with that. Individual institutions have been certified. Many, if not all, of the institutions. There are establishments in Grenada that are open that have not been inspected, not just in St. George's outside. That's a constant work of the wardens as well, to visit and we find this happening in most cases closer to the wee hours. As in this instance, it's late night that individuals push the envelope, and there will be stricter enforcement of that, and institutions will be closed. I'm putting out a warning to institutions. Those that are non-compliant will be closed for an extended period until you can show that you have done the training and now meet the compliance. It's not just a closing for an hour. The Christmas season is coming up. Many businesses have been suffering, and many are looking forward to being open for Christmas. But if you are non-compliant, you run the risk of being closed for the entire Christmas period.
I wanted to speak towards the falsifying of the names. Now, when Minister spoke about falsifying names, it was to emphasize that if individuals were to put a false name or a fake name on a log and a number at which they cannot be reached, if an event like this occurs and that person was exposed, that person might be infected. They will not have been contacted by Ministry of Health. They will go on to infect their co-workers and their family, and someone may die. So it is meant to emphasize that we must all be responsible in every act. Who are they? I mean, what are they escaping from? They are just endangering themselves and everyone around them. So it's just meant to emphasize that persons must be responsible in every way.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. Linda, I think there was a third question from you. I don't think we quite got that because there was some interference. Linda, can you please repeat your third question?
The three that I asked were answered. I do have another one.
Okay, we'll come back to you because Nisha Paul also has questions. So let me go to her and check to see if there's anybody else, and then we can come back around to you. Nisha, you may proceed with your questions. Nisha Paul?
Hello?
Yes, you
Hello?
may proceed. Yes, good morning. We can hear you. You may proceed.
Hi. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I want to find out if any reconsideration will be given to social distancing in schools, given in light of this development. And also, can you tell me, persons who would have tested positive for the virus, what medication is being used to treat them?
I think I'll let Dr. Charles answer the second one, and then maybe the first.
All right. So in terms of medication, you would treat persons who are sick. All right, persons who are symptomatic. In this instance, the persons have either very mild or no symptoms at all. All right. So all they require is monitoring. So at present, there is no medication. There is no particular medication that is being given to them. In fact, there is still no vaccine and no drug that has been registered or licensed to treat COVID. There have been a number of experimental therapies that were tried, and I believe the majority were found to have no effect. All right. So with regards to the first question, as it relates to schools, there is no evidence of community spread of COVID in Grenada. So there is no reason to change any guidelines as it relates to schools. The Ministry of Health continues to aggressively to investigate any potential exposures to COVID. And this is how we intend to avoid a situation where we would need to change things and put in more restrictions and alter the way things operate. So the answer to the question is no. There is no need, and there isn't going to be any changes right now.
Well, with respect to the question of the medication or so, too, I mean, as a layperson here, just simply to add that symptoms are treated based on with medication. It's not the virus that there is a medication or a drug or so for the virus. It depends on the symptoms that the individual has. That would dictate from the doctor's standpoint what medication, if any, the individual gets. Discussions in the UK, there are discussions in Europe, there are discussions in the US, there are discussions in other Caribbean islands as well. Those discussions and whatever system is put in place is determined by the local epidemiological situation of the individual countries at any given time. It is a moving target, and to say that the criteria that we have this week will be the criteria that we have next week, we cannot say that. What we can say is that we consistently and continually monitor the local epidemiological situation in Grenada, and should it change in either direction, we make adjustments accordingly as deemed necessary.
Thank you very much, Minister. Nisha, would that be all from you this morning? Proceed.
Hello?
Yes, Nisha, you may go ahead with your question.
Yes. Minister Steele, some time ago you spoke about a particular medication from Cuba, I believe. I can't remember the name of the medication right now, but you spoke about bringing it in from Cuba. Can you, if you could recall what I'm speaking about, can you provide some information in that regard?
I know very early in the outbreak, we were adding as much as possible to what I would have referred to as our toolbox, making sure that various medications, and yes, there were some from Cuba, making sure that they were on island, so that our team, clinical team, would have access to it if they chose to have access. From where I sit at the ministry's standpoint, the Ministry of Health, we do not make a determination as to what medication should be used by our doctors. We make sure that we have as best as possible all the medication that our doctors choose to use based on information that they give us, as well as from PAHO and WHO. And that would have been where the medication from Cuba or the discussion on it would have come up as to whether it's being used.
Thank you very much, Minister. Linda Straker, we can come back now to you if you still have further questions.
Yes, I do have. Yesterday, we all woke up to the news of the possibility of a vaccine that proved to be 90% effective. Now, I know that Grenada is part of Gavi. I know the minister knows what that means. And under the IDA, it is eligible for certain benefits. Can the minister share with us and the nation what are the benefits that Grenada has to Gavi with regard to being part of the COVAX facility? My other question is to do with, recently I saw in an online publication that there is a limitation as to the team that is trained to administer the test. That's all for now.
Okay, thank you, Linda. With respect to Grenada's benefit from WHO, Pan American Health Organization, Gavi, these are institutions that we have worked with for decades. Gavi gives great assistance with HIV, tuberculosis, and others, not just here in Grenada, but worldwide. So these would be the same entities that we are having discussions with. Yes, Grenada does qualify for financial assistance that is either subsidized or free, depending on the actual vaccine, if and when that vaccine comes. Yesterday, with respect to progress, significant progress on a vaccination by Pfizer. It is still not approved as yet. They are making announcements that they have had significant progress with it. I want to reiterate, because I want us to be very, very precise when we are dealing with vaccines. There are many announcements on various vaccines coming out of various countries. Grenada will rely on Pan American Health Organization, the WHO, and CARPHA to make a determination on any vaccine. We will not make a unilateral decision on any vaccination. We will go with a regional decision to ensure that the region as a whole, Pan American Health Organization and CARPHA, are intimately involved in that decision-making process. And we have clearly said so. It's available, we would have access to it. But I also caution individuals, while I too am optimistic with all of the positive information we've been hearing about vaccine population to be vaccinated by the end of 2021 or middle of 2022, should there be a vaccine. Now, as to if that means 20% of Grenada, or that Grenada would be fully vaccinated at that point in time and add to the 20%. Those are the types of discussions that we are having to make sure that it is available, and how this vaccine would be available. Would it just be for healthcare frontline workers and persons who are at risk, or will it be national? It all depends on the quantity and the type of vaccine. The other question as well with vaccines, how long the immunity lasts. Does someone need a booster? Would you have one shot and then in a week's time, 2 weeks' time, a month's time, that you would need questions as yet that we have to look at with respect to any vaccine?
Thank you very much, Minister. Linda, I think those were your final two questions. Do we have any?
Minister, in the test was not answered.
Sorry, yes, Linda. That continues to be a difficult area for us. Other countries have social media or various international media. In Grenada, we rely to date on our medical personnel, in particular our contingent of nurses, public health nurses, who are out there doing the swabbing, etc. That is why I do believe that they need significant recognition. These individuals are working 7 days a week. When you hear calls from or complaints on social media of people saying, well, I haven't been swabbed as yet, or I've been waiting all day, and where are the people? These are our nurses that are going around throughout the country to our accommodation sites. When persons are granted home quarantine, they have to go to the individual homes to swab persons. They have to get this done most of the time in the early hours of the morning, a first batch, so that we can get a first run by 11 o'clock to start a first run. So they have to go. There is a certain level of discomfort with using non-health professionals for this. It's a continued discussion that we are having as to how to adjust and address that bottleneck, so to speak, in terms of the limitations of persons able to swab.
Minister, just for clarity, is there a certain number of persons? We have 10, 20 persons who comprise of both nurses and volunteers? Or just all nurses are doing it?
No, as I said, it's all nurses that are currently doing the swabbing. We have not used any volunteers as yet. And the nurses that we have are the nurses that currently work in the public service, especially those that work in the community, and a limited number who work at hospital.
Callistra Faria, I think you have a question.
Good morning, Minister CMO. I must first apologize. I joined very, very late, so I'm not sure if the issue of the geofence watch, the GPS tracker, came up, if that question was asked. And his wife were not wearing geo trackers, which is, I got the impression from medical officials that it was mandatory if you got approved for home quarantine.
Callistra, just to interrupt you, that question has actually been asked and answered.
So
Can you please move on to the second? The question of the watches has been asked and answered, so can you move on to the second in the interest of time? Callistra, are you there?
Have we had problems with our test results in terms of mix-up? A lot of it requires human intervention in dealing with it. Have we had instances where test results for one person would have gone to the other person, someone else, and so on? I'm getting reports that has happened at least once. So do we have a situation with that we need to correct?
No, we have not had a single instance of collecting samples, not just for COVID-19, but blood samples, stool samples, urine samples, etc., and so has never been questioned here in Grenada at all. Our nurses, working on the front line and doctors on the front line collecting samples have provide human service, and that has not been questioned. What has happened is whether the sample is viable or not. We have had instances where not enough has been collected, or in the determination of the laboratory that they would like an additional sample from an individual, but not at all. And I want to reiterate again, because those in the field and at the lab will take great offense to yes, there have been individuals who we have had to re-swab because the sample wasn't viable, and I'd let Dr. Sean explain what it means when you say not viable. But definitely, no question about mix-up of individuals.
Yes, and I wanted to restate that. Despite what you might have heard, so that is something that must be really highlighted. There are samples that can, for example, on arriving at the lab, they're not viable simply because maybe as a result of there being a very small amount of the liquid that preserves the sample, it is simply not enough for the sample to be run. So those samples are not viable, and we may need to rerun them. All right. There might be an instance where the tube maybe wasn't sealed as tightly, and it might the liquid might have seeped out. All right. This happens very infrequently. All right. However, in those instances, we retake the sample. All right. But there is no mix-up.
Let me add on that. Hold on, Kalisha.
In all the tests that we have conducted, have we done tests for?
Let me just add that our chief medical officer isn't just speaking from the standpoint of the person managing this system, but Dr. Charles has gone out and swabbed himself individuals, particularly, and I think worthy of mention, individuals who may be positive or are positive, or so, to ensure that the sample is proper and to ensure that the system is managed. So he's been hands-on on this. So when he says this hasn't happened, we can be assured.
So I also asked, have we had, during this whole period of testing, have we tested all our tests on inbound people? Obviously, we have people here who we test for contamination, but anyone leaving Grenada, have we been doing those tests for people leaving Grenada? Have we tested people?
We've been testing persons coming into Grenada. We have been doing random testing for persons in Grenada with no travel history, a PCR test in order to travel to another destination. We received for the month of October almost 2,800 people coming in. All were tested once, and some of them twice, based on whether they were home quarantine or not. And we have had a significant number of people who require PCR tests to travel. Those individuals are asked to go to the general hospital between the hours of 8 and 10 a.m. Monday to Friday, make their payment for their test, and the test results, like all other test results, are ready within 24 to 48 hours for them to collect and use for traveling onwards or out of Grenada. And SGU has been working with us. I believe SGU has tested upwards of somewhere between 15 to 2,500 individuals. Yeah, close to 3,000 now individuals with just by connection, i.e. they've tested all of their students on island, local and non-Grenadian students. They've tested all of their faculty and staff on island. They've tested anyone who has any relationship to SGU, i.e. entry, have done the same throughout the communities, frontline workers, healthcare workers, etc., at their request, or when we have certain instances, call it a scare or an alarm or so, individuals have been tested as well. And this is PCR PCR. This is separate and apart from the testing that occurs at facilities with the rapid test.
Here locally.
Can I go ahead with my final question, please?
Sure, you may. Go ahead.
Apart from being a medical doctor and having facilities that were approved for them to stay at, was there any other consideration for the McKinney's for the recent cases being approved for home quarantine? I ask because a Nigerian medical doctor was denied home quarantine. He was moving into a facility that's based on quarantine. So their conditions appeared to be the same as all recent cases, but they were denied. So is there anything else about the two recent cases that why they were approved?
Klesha, you were going well up until there. What I would say most definitely is you are making statements that you can't back up, and you're making them publicly. This is a live press conference. There is no information that there's been any special treatment or so given. I started this conference by saying that the individual was a doctor. There is no information of another doctor being refused, and to make those insinuations on air, live air, is irresponsible. I think what you should have, let me finish. You asked your question. The team makes a determination based on the accommodation, and as I have said, the new criterias that have been set. If someone was a doctor applying, another doctor applied, they would not have been granted just simply being another doctor. It would depend on the location of the accommodation as well. You or I not being privy to the details of that, I think that's why I am saying it is irresponsible to make the insinuation that someone else met the same conditions, because you're not present and you don't have the information of the inspection or the reason why, if at all, there was another application from another doctor that was denied. I think we have to rely on the judgment of the team that is doing that pre-screening and visiting of residents, etc., to make the determination, and that when they make the determination, that they stand by that determination, as we are doing now. When we made a determination to grant this individual home quarantine, we're standing by it, and we're saying that we made a judgment where, in our wildest imagination, that you would say an experienced doctor would be irresponsible. But there are also other conditions that have to be met. So there are no two applications are the same. So no two applications can be compared to say, well, how come you gave this person based on his profession or so? And that's not the only determination. So I think we just need to rely on the team, that they are using their discretion to grant the privilege of home quarantine wherever they see the risk to be worth or to be limited, regrettably not meeting the criteria for home quarantine.
And I believe there are certain boundaries that even the press should not cross, especially in a live event, in terms of deliberately or inadvertently stating certain, putting certain information out there that shouldn't be, that can compromise person's identity. So I believe that you should examine maybe the recording and accept that some things just shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, I was going to address that in my wrap-up statement, and we're all expected to place extreme value on the responsibility given, and as such, a breach in certain individuals' rights, or making use responsible of any of us myself included. So therefore, we need to recognize the fact that as journalists and as officials, that there are rules that cannot, not should not, cannot be breached.
Thank you very much, Minister. At this point, I think we shall take closing statements. Dr. Charles, we can start with you, and then we'll end with the Minister.
So, as I do always, I like to invite the public to continue to work along with the Ministry of Health. Every action that we take, to protect you and to protect us, to protect our families. So I would just like to continue to encourage everyone to follow the protocols, wear your mask, sanitize, maintain the social distance. To the businesses, you are given some protocols, some rules that you need to follow. These were put in to facilitate a safe or a safer Grenada. Just walk along with us and assist us all in protecting our own selves, protecting our country, protecting our health, and protecting our economy. And that is what I would like to ask today.
Thank you very much for your closing statements, Dr. Charles. Minister Steele?
Yes, let me say that from the get-go, the Ministry of Health, Government of Grenada have put certain rules, regulations, protocols in place and implored the public to follow them. These are rules with respect to social protocols when we're out, entertainment centers, restaurants, shops, supermarkets, buses, schools, as well as rules for entering the country and what must be done once you arrive in Grenada. The Grenada has made no errors or mistakes with these rules. What we have is individuals refusing to follow the rules and the breaches, and as such, the Ministry of Health has had to move from being the ministry responsible for caring for us and providing health care to also being an enforcement mechanism to make sure and take the blame when individuals are non-compliant. But if we think this whole process through, in the same way that the Ministry of Health is responsible for treating, the ministry does do public service announcements to say what to do and what not to do. But it is always saying that the government of Grenada is to blame for every individual there that didn't follow the instructions or the public service announcements for personal health. We do believe we have a responsibility to protect and will go the distance necessary. But I do need the public to recognize that we will do our best to enforce, but we are not a police state, and nor do we hope to become one. Individuals are going out of their way. Some individuals are going out of their way seriously. Not just visitors, but we ourselves running establishments here in Grenada, trying to carry on our livelihoods. Some of us are breaching the rules and regulations and putting the rest of us at risk. But we should not have to be spending so much of our resources on enforcement. This is a life-threatening virus, and there should be more compliance and more cooperation from the public at large, recognizing the threat to us all and not simply passing it on to the RGPF and the ministry. Do not enter an establishment if they are not taking a proper log. When an establishment is taking a log, please give your correct name. These seem to be normal, common sense requests for your own protection. Do not enter a bus if the driver or conductor are not wearing masks. They will become compliant. It is because there, and that is why the owners, managers of whatever are continuing. Because we are frequenting their places, we are giving them our money, and then we are saying, well, the ministry should stop them. Do not put yourself at risk if you see the establishment that you are entering or about to enter is not following the protocols, and report non-compliance. And having an attitude of, well, sooner or later they will get compliant, but it's not my responsibility. I can continue to frequent the place or so. We have places throughout the country that are passing inspections, but then and find the discipline and work together to make sure that one, there are little or no breaches, and two, if and when there is, that we are all protected as best as possible. We do need your help to work this out. We have to do this together as a people. This is not just a charge of the government, the Ministry of Health, and the RGPF. This is all of us. This is all of us to follow the rules and regulations that will protect us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Steele, for your final closing comments there. That brings us to the end of this week's post-cabinet press briefing. I am Press Secretary